My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today we're going to be answering a question that really kind of pervades a lot of searches online about Alaska, and that is Alaska a safe place to live? Well, we'll be answering that in just a second. Before we get started, give this video a like, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and let's go ahead and jump into today's video. The first thing I would say is it really all comes down to your perspective and what it is that you're used to. Me personally, I actually feel safer in most parts of Alaska than how I feel when I'm down in the lower 48. There's all sorts of crazy stuff happening down there, and I know statistically not a good chance I'm going to get caught up in a lot of that, but still, my perception is it's actually safer for the most part in Alaska as a whole than it is in lower 48. Now, the reason for that is that most of the crimes, murders, and all the other, pretty violent crimes that you see here committed in Alaska are committed in a pretty concentrated area. So I'll let you take a look at the crime map and draw your own conclusions. But most of the crime, just anywhere across the board, the lion's share of it is going to be committed in some pretty condensed little areas. And that definitely is the case with Alaska. So the first question you need to really answer for yourself if you're deciding whether or not you should be afraid of living in Alaska is where specifically are you looking at moving? And you need to really kind of dive into the crime map and make sure that you kind of vibe with the tribe wherever it is that you're going. One extra tip I always give people is, hey, look at the crime map for where you're wanting to go, but also look at the crime map for where you currently live. And that's pretty sobering for a lot of people because they, thought that they lived in this perfect crime-free Mayberry. And then they take a look at the crime and they're like, holy cows, there's a lot more going on here than I was aware of. And that kind of gives you a good context as to, whether or not crime that you're seeing here is something you can live with or not. One thing I really do want to point out is that even though in Alaska, most of the danger that people talk about kind of comes from other people, most of the legitimate danger, that doesn't necessarily mean that the wildlife is just completely safe, okay? We do have people who do get hurt and actually people who have died recently from wildlife. It's not particularly unheard of for this stuff to happen. We had actually a bear attack and kill, I think, a couple people a couple of years ago just over in Eagle River. I have a friend of mine who, was attacked by a moose and actually broke a bone in her foot. And, there's, other instances of wildlife having these encounters with people as well, and with it not particularly ending well. Not necessarily in death, but definitely not ending well. So yes, while most of the discussion is kind of focused around people and the danger that they provide, it's also important to just make it sound like there's no danger from the wildlife at all. That being said, most of the encounters you have with wildlife up here are not going to end with anything more than you just kind of respecting their boundaries and maybe taking a couple pictures from a safe distance, and that's really about it. Like usually the wildlife here, you're going to run into it when you least expect it. The only time I have run into a bear, like actually seen a bear while I've been out running with all the miles I've put in, has been while I was in a residential neighborhood. Okay, that's the only time, and I've run around the mountains and trails and everything else here, and that's the only time I've ever run into a bear. But kind of respected his boundaries, and that was really about the end of it. In that same vein, getting out and experiencing Alaska, you're probably going to be exposed to more danger than what you would normally have. Maybe danger is not the right word, maybe risk, whatever you want to call it, but either way, you're going to be experiencing a higher vulnerability when you're going out and actually experiencing Alaska. For instance, I went out to Eklutna Lake, did some paddle boarding, innocent enough, and one thing led to another. I've got the entire story linked somewhere else on the channel here, but I didn't necessarily think I was going to be able to get back from that one. I've had some other instances of, having some, running and not really hearing any bears, but kind of hear them like snuffling like right next to me and stuff. That's not a great feeling. By the way, I've had other instances and heard of other people running into bears, and I've had like boating incidences where people have almost been capsized out at sea. So there's just a lot of experiencing Alaska where you just kind of have to accept that there's going to be some element of risk just with getting up here and just experiencing and living Alaska to its full potential. Let's take a break here real quick. For those who've been watching for a little bit, you know I have a relocation guide for those of you considering moving up here. If that's something that would help you, do feel free to go to my website. Description section down below is where you're going to find that. And then in the little comment section, just make sure you put relocation guide so I know what to send you. Things like the mudflats are going to be very, very dangerous without people even realizing it. Now, what mudflats are is you'll see like the tides go out around like the inlets here in the area, and you just have this big, wide open, muddy plain out there. And some people will kind of get suckered into, oh, okay, let's just walk across the mud and get to the water. The problem is that mud is like made of silt from glaciers, and it will suck you down into the mud. To the point where, you know, as soon as the tide starts coming in, you are just stuck and you can't get out no matter how hard you try. And we've had a number of people who have died from that. It's not a good way to go. Be very, very cautious / don't even mess with the mud flats. That's what all the Alaskans will tell you, like, just don't even mess with it. It's totally not worth it. Just leave it alone. If you do get stuck, immediately call somebody. Don't think you're going to figure it out yourself. And save yourself a little bit of money. Like, just call them immediately and pray to God they can get there. Another thing that can be pretty dangerous about Alaska is it is a developing area, and some of our busier roads right now are still 2-lane roads. Now, this is all fine and good until you get into an area where there's like a lot of turnoffs and people are just constantly, you know, having to stop and make that turn. All fine and good until somebody is looking down for a split second at their phone. And yeah, obviously things happen in a split second, and before you know it, you know, someone's life can be completely different. So some of the back roads, just depending on how much traffic there is, those can definitely be dangerous. It's just something you have to constantly be aware and make sure you're actually keeping your attention on the road itself. Now, one more thing, talking about like danger and safety and living in Alaska. One thing that I've seen lately is a lot of people concerned about Russia invading Alaska. And I think legitimately Alaskans are some of the few people out there that are actually concerned about it. And the reason for that is that this is one of the most armed populations in the entire state. A very large swath of the population up here are retired veterans, and there's just a lot of other geographical benefits to living up here that makes an invasion very unlikely, not the least of which being anyone who did try to invade, they'd have to cross the Bering Sea, which is one of the most punishing seas in the entire world. And then once you get here, even if the U.S. Air Force hasn't been messing with you the entire way, you're going to get to a pretty hostile environment that's actually very, very friendly to defensive warfare for those of us who are here and ready to throw down. The idea that Alaskans are really worried about an invasion from Russia, yeah, that's not really something a whole lot of us talk about up here. It's not like we're just minding, you know, everyone else is just minding their own business, and Alaskans are like, well, what are the Russians doing? Like, that's really not even something we even talk about. So this has been my video talking about kind of the dangerous things about living in Alaska. Is it dangerous? Yes, anywhere is going to be dangerous. If it's not dangerous, it's probably in like some virtual reality kind of thing, in which case that's an entirely different type of danger. So there's no such thing as a risk-free or danger-free world. The question is whether or not is the level of danger something you can handle, and is it an acceptable trade-off for the benefits that you're getting up here is really what you should be asking. If you have more questions that's going to help you to answer that question, feel free to reach out to me on my website down below. I'd be more than happy to chat a little bit and see if moving up to Alaska is something you should consider. Other than that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.